Yes, welcome back. This video is about the changing circle of friends. I had a chance to interview three enchanting people as part of this. I want to do a brief introduction. I asked them to speak to three questions. The first one is, how did your relationships change after you retired? Second question was, how have you built new or deeper friendships since you retired? And the third question was, what would you do differently if you could do it over again? The three people you're going to meet here are Carol Chalukas, who's a fantastic, effervescent, committed retiree involved in many activities. She loves to lead, and so she's found a number of opportunities to do that. She's also figured out how to selectively deepen the relationships she's had. Bob Reiki is a retired pastor from a local church, and Bob's dilemma, as shared by some of you, is that he needed to make the shift from confidential relationships as a pastor to a friend and acquaintance in a relatively small town. And he speaks to how he manages that dilemma. And he also has done an effective job, I think, finding some forums and spaces where he had not previously been known. And so that's given him some freedom. And then also Trevor Hoskins is part of this interview. He is a fantastically, wonderfully extroverted, effervescent character, has incredible involvement in our community in lots of different ways. So listen to these stories and attend to some of the themes that you'll hear. Yes, I wanted to just introduce Carol Chalukas.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Please,
you, Dwight.
you're welcome.
Okay. Well, I am Carol Chalukas, and I have been retired for approximately 9 years. Before my retirement was the most recent job. Right before I retired was in pharmaceutical sales. I was a manager of a multi-state territory, hiring and training people to call on physicians representing various companies in the pharmaceutical industry. And prior to that, I spent about 14 years working for Mattel Toys in a variety of positions, but ending up in national account sales. Before that, I was a stay-at-home mom, and before that, I was a high school English teacher. So that's the rundown of my careers.
Wow, what a great career.
It's been fun.
There's a rumor also that you have one of the world's best Barbie collections because of your Mattel collection.
I have a Barbie collection, nowhere near the world's best, I can tell you that. But I do have a Barbie collection.
And this is partially funding your retirement?
No, it won't fund my retirement, although I'm getting to the point where I just like to get rid of it. So you may find it. You may find it on eBay at any time.
Great. So I asked Carol to talk with us a little bit about deepening friendships after retirement, because the constellation of the friends that you had while you were working changes.
Absolutely.
For various reasons. So the first question I wanted to ask you, Carol, is how did your relationships change after you retired?
Well, I think on the whole, my relationships broadened. I met different kinds of people from different venues. I think because instead of being so focused on work, after I retired, I became involved in a number of volunteer organizations and just did things I'd wanted to do. Started taking piano lessons, tried a little tap dancing, various things like that, started working out seriously. So in each of those areas, I was able to connect with people. And they were coming from various different places. So we all weren't in the pharmaceutical business or in the toy business. And so that was one way of broadening, just by getting out there and getting involved in all the things that are available when you retire. Met a lot of people that way.
What kind of volunteer activities?
Well, volunteer for me mostly centered around our church and getting involved in various committees and the volunteer work there. But I've enjoyed it. I really have, because in a way it was for me a good transition, and still is, from work, because you can still pretend that you're in charge of something. So I kind of like that. Yes, I'll run that committee or that activity, because I still do like to figure it all out and
Good. And
Tell
lead.
people what to do.
Tell
Oh,
people-
lead.
No,
That would
we
be it.
frame it as leading.
Yes,
as
lead.
opposed to
I like to
tell-
lead.
being bossy. This is interesting. So it sounds like during the time you were working, you didn't have as much time for those other things, tap dancing, working out the way you used to. So the
No.
broadening pieces of,
Right. I think there was a lot more time. No, when I'm working, I did some things, played a little golf, did a little of this, but there's not really time, especially in my jobs. I was traveling a lot. So my free time was on the airplane. And when I came home, I really did want to just stay home for
Right.
the most part. But that did change with retirement. So yeah, I like to get out there and do a lot of different things. And I have met people that I wouldn't otherwise have met. And it surprised me because we live in a small town, and I've always lived in large cities. But I've always even drove through small towns thinking, I wonder who lives here. They're probably not very interesting. But now that I live in a small town and have met all of these people, many of them lived here all their lives, but many are coming from other places with all kinds of fabulous backgrounds and interesting stories. And it's been wonderful to get to know them.
and they turn out to be more interesting than you thought they might be.
Much more interesting, yes.
Much more.
Definitely.
Tell me a little bit about how you deepen relationships. I mean, we're at an age where intimacy is a bit awkward for folks, I think, in terms of depth of friendship, the amount you can share. How do you go about deepening those relationships?
I think I've been able to develop several deep, what I would consider pretty deep relationships, mainly by just connecting with the people who have the most in common with me in this case. So I have met many friends, but I have found two in particular that I've really connected with. And I think that's because we've been able to share our experiences from our past life. We've found a lot of common connections in what's been happening to our children, or how our marriages have gone, or we're all dealing with aging. Some of us are dealing with husbands who are older, who are aging even more quickly.
Yeah.
So as we start to share these things as kind of supporting one another, that really does help to deepen those relationships. And I don't know if this is a stereotype or not, but I do think it's easier for women to
share and
talk about intimate things, because we're not worried about what somebody. I don't know. It's just easy.
So are those two friends women, or
They are.
okay? Then you would imagine maybe that it would be a little harder to do that if it's a man, because they're not as comfortable self-disclosing.
I don't think
sharing
men
that
are
sort of
generally as comfortable self-disclosing. I mean, I have friends who are men, but maybe it's because they don't tap dance or whatever. I haven't worked out with them.
Exactly.
I hadn't have as many opportunities to
don't
become
do
friends
things
with
like
men. No, I need to be on the golf course, I guess, if I want to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's interesting to think about that, because if I spend time on the golf course, as you know, and you don't really build intimacy on the golf course. It's a side-by-side intimacy.
Right.
You walk together, you talk about golf shots, and it's relatively superficial.
Right.
And, I'm a psychologist, so I try to probably pick apart things a little bit here, but I like this concept of sharing. It really, if I'm understanding you, it really means self-disclosure. It means you risking sharing some piece of yourself that maybe you're not sure how it's going to be received, and then that's reciprocal, and sort of together you build that with somebody.
Absolutely.
And it's tentative, at least. It's rather than jumping.
Right. I think you start out with less volatile things. You might disclose something about who knows, something about one of your children.
Right.
In this case,
worry about them, or
your worry
concern.
or whatever. As in this case, one of my best friends and I both have children living in Japan. So that became an original connection. Not many people have children living in Japan on a permanent basis. So once we started there, then we were able to build from that point. And by this point, we were sharing things that I'm not going to share with you.
No, I understand. and I imagine also, Carol, that you have the other experience where you began to share things like that, and you didn't get any reciprocity, or people were uncomfortable going there, and so those have remained more acquaintances.
I think so. Yes, you put out the feelers and just see what the response is, and I'm sure other people have done the same. Put out the feelers to me, and I didn't respond as in that way. So no, I do. There are plenty of people who are acquaintances I enjoy spending time with, but that I wouldn't share intimacies with. So probably just a couple of friends that become that close to. But that's plenty in a way. You know,
you don't need 10.
No, not 10 people to share with.
Two or three
is good.
Yeah, nice.
Right.
So if you've been retired about 9 years, you said, or so. If you were to kind of do this over, what would you do differently if you could go back and kind of restructure the way you approach this retirement and you're building friendships?
Well, not to sound too egotistical, but I think it's worked out really well. I've been very happy with my retirement. It's been one of the greatest times of my life. It really has. I've enjoyed all the things I'm participating in. I've enjoyed deeper relationships with people. It's truly been a great time, and I've never regretted the next year. I'm looking forward to each one after that.
Are you still able to be bossy in certain circumstances?
That's why I do stuff at church. So, people are hesitant, and I'm like, I'll do that. So
Carol will do that.
It gets my, you have to feed that little bit of your ego still, and that's how I do it. And then I'm done with that, and hopefully I can be less bossy in other situations, more social.
That's great. Anything else that we missed here about this?
I don't know. One thing I was thinking about is what the difference the technology has made. I have connected with a couple of old friends via Facebook. And I always thought that, we've moved around the country a lot and changed jobs frequently. And I'm not a good correspondent. I don't keep up with people really well. But I've always found that those relationships that were really important, I've been able to pick up again, when you run into somebody at the airport or you happen to decide to spend a weekend with them or whatever, and you just pick up where you left off. And I recently picked up with a friend from my childhood, actually my best friend from the time I was 8 till the time I was 14.
Oh, fantastic.
And we're not sharing intimacies, so there's been too much time passed, but it's been great. So I think there are lots more ways to keep in touch with people these days than there used to be.
And this enables it, Skype.
Absolutely.
Those are fun, aren't they? Because it's almost like it's seamless. It's like the years didn't exist in between.
I know. You don't have to know all the good or the bad parts. It's like, ooh, 50 years passed. Look at you.
Nice familiarity. Yeah.
Right. And my friend that I picked up with is also retired and enjoying her life. And so it's like we didn't have to. We got through the messy part.
Great.
That way.
Good for you. Well, thank you very much for spending this time.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
As an ordained pastor, many of my relationships were dual relationships. For example, the woman or man active in my church was also the person who offered goods or services in the small towns and cities in which I live. I would express a genuine warmth to those persons, but there was also a certain pragmatism to my relationships. Common wisdom dictates that clergy not make close friendships within their congregations. But in small communities, asking community folks to come to church seemed to imply that I would also purchase insurance or gas or groceries, eat at their restaurants. It was often difficult for me to know where necessity ended and friendship began. With clergy issues of confidentiality, it was difficult to carry on deep friend conversations. This added an extra level of complexity. Now, in retirement, the boundaries of confidentiality is still significant. The rules of engagement for my denomination state that I'm not to return to the church that I had served until that church has gone through a period of discernment and selected a new pastor, and that new pastor welcomes me back into that congregation. Yet I would see many members, church members, people I had been connected to, people who had on some level become friends on a daily basis, people whose children I had baptized, people whose children I had confirmed, families whose members had been Okay.
It's all coming back.
It's all coming back. It's all coming back to me now. There would be occasions where I would have had very emotional funeral services for different family members and had dealt with those people on a highly intimate level, people who had become close friends. But in retirement, there are topic boundaries. And I had a certain discomfort in this distance, which literally for some precluded friendship. Friendship at arm's length sometimes isn't the type of friendship that many people want or prefer or would even court. And so I had some friendships that sort of faded, some that died a natural death. Clergy are often asked to establish their closest relationships outside of their church communities. But in smaller cities, this is nigh onto impossible. And even with trusted clergy colleagues, a change from an active to a retired status meant a gradual fading of contact. In terms of building new relationships, I retired in July of 2010. And my wife and I traveled for the next 6 months. Basically, what we did was a Rolling Stones tour of the state of Wisconsin and all of the parishes I had served there. And returning home, I felt a need to do something that was energizing and engaging and stimulating, a new way of growing, or at least maintaining body, mind, and spirit health. I had two thoughts. That first, I want to do something very different than I did as a clergy. But another, this recommendation came from a clergy friend, was that I use my skill set in a slightly different way. And I decided to go with number 2. I went to a local nursing home and asked if I could plug in with residents facing transitional life issues, emptiness and despair and fear and anxiety, depression, loneliness, even death. And so I ended up at this nursing home wearing 2 hats. One was a chaplain, and the other, interestingly enough, was a bus driver. And I would be working 3 days a week, 15 to 20 hours a week. I entered a new relationship as an employee within a caregiving setting. I had a different experience with authority and power distribution. Within this new employment were opportunities for growing new relationships. Functioning as a team member within a diverse community of service providers, women and men, older and younger, multiple ethnicities, I am growing new relationships with some of these people, meeting some outside of employment. This feels good and challenging and healthy and stimulating. What would I do differently? Perhaps moving to a new community because of my former employment as clergy. And this was our initial plan, but changes in the housing market and the fact that we own our own home made this difficult. And in retrospect, with my wife getting a job within this community and with my work at a nursing home, things have worked out quite well. No other desires for do-overs. Things have worked out well. I'm feeling joy in my present employment. My wife and I are happy here in this community.
I retired, Dwight, in 1998. I was Senior Vice President for Bridgestone Corporation, the Japanese-owned tire company. In that job, I traveled all throughout the world. Had a wonderful career. I handled everything from employee communications to dealer relations to community relations. Anything that needed doing in any part of the world that was a problem for the company seemed to end up on my desk. But it was a wonderful career.
Wonderful. So you spent a lot of time on airplanes and in different parts of the world.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't mind if I don't fly in another airplane ever again.
Good for you. So let me start by asking you, how did your relationships change after you retired?
Well, of course, like everyone, you miss the people that you work with for a long time. There's no question about that. I'll be quite honest with you. I didn't really miss the work. It was a pressure cooker in the last few years, and I was ready to retire.
Good.
But of course, I moved away from the location. I was in Nashville, Tennessee. We moved to the Seattle area in Washington. So it was a big change from a location. And you meet new people, you meet new neighbors, you get involved in different associations, and you start to find your way in a different world than the business world.
Now, how did you go about meeting new people?
Well, neighbors just walked up to them and told them, I just moved here, I just retired. It was good to be in the state of Washington. And I found people extremely friendly. You know, friendship, I think, Dwight, you can't be taught it at school, but if you don't learn it, you have nothing else in life.
Mm-hmm. And then you said, so the neighbors and then organizations?
There was a community association for one of the homeowners association type deal. I became involved with that. That got me known. I got in touch with local media who I dealt with all my life, and so find out things that they would know. And I've never had any problem making friends with people at all. Mm-hmm. It's been the easiest thing in my life, and it's continued that way.
Okay, great. And so when you think about it, along that way during retirement, how have you deepened those friendships that you made? They start as acquaintances and then they get deeper.
Yeah, I think this happens like you. I play golf, I run, I bike, I do all those kind of things, and you meet different people in those different fields, and you select those people that you want to spend more time with. Some are just, meet a dozen or 18 people and some golf group, and you get to know all of them, and then probably 3 or 4 of them you have a closer relationship, and it just evolves.
You know, I'm a psychologist, so I'm curious about sort of picking apart how it evolves. And can you tell me a little bit more about how do you select those 3 or 4 people?
I think that you have, you're in common with certain things in your life and things that you have interest in. I happen to be, as my office shows you, a motor racing enthusiast. And I meet people and I find that with motor racing, you're either very, very keen on it or you hate it. And people who are very keen on it, we naturally sort of start talking about motor racing, and it develops from there. You find out that people have similar interests, and that's the easiest way to make a friend.
So it's really the places that you spend time in and the similar interests, and that builds those friendships.
Exactly. International travel is the finest education anyone can get. You meet all kinds of people. You meet them both flying, you meet them in the countries that you work in, and then you start meeting people in your retirement life who've done a similar job.
Yeah.
And they're all glad to be away from the flying and the international business.
Have you found that you kept a couple of those long-term relationships internationally, people that live in different countries?
Yes, I have. Obviously, I came from England a long time ago now, but I still communicate with 2 people in England who we probably interchange correspondence once a month or something like that. I last was back over there 4 years ago and looked those 2 people up, and we will always be in touch. There are things that they tell me about my old country that I wouldn't know otherwise. You read stuff in newspapers and television, you see it, but then you hear the real story from your friends.
Oh, interesting. So if you could go back and do it over again in these years since retirement, would you change anything? Would you do anything differently in terms of friendships?
Not really. I probably would try and stay in closer touch with some of the people that I had as good friends who you just... Obviously, you move, you change locations, you change homes, and you feel perhaps a little bit out of it because you're no longer in the daily stream of things that they're in. Right. And maybe I would have tried harder to have stayed in touch with them. But I think I've always felt in retirement is that, people who go back to their offices after they retire are just a nuisance. It's great to go out and shake hands, but they've got work to do, and I didn't do that because I moved away from Nashville, Tennessee, as I said, to Washington, so I didn't go back and see them. Maybe if I changed things, I would have maintained more contact.
Yeah. And how did you, just last question, how did you and Judy decide to move to Washington?
It was a no-brainer for me, Dwight. Judy has 3 sons who had already moved here, so I knew, and I have one son who was in Florida, so I kind of knew that the wait would be that we would end up in Washington, and we did, mainly because of family.
For family reasons.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Anything else upon reflection of this?
I've just found it very easy all my life to make friends with people. Very easy. And there are very few occasions when someone that you feel you like turns down your friendship. I've never found that happening to me at all. Anyone that I have extended a hand to has come back to me.
Wonderful.
I've not had any problem at all.
Trevor, thanks for spending the time with us.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Dwight. Good luck.
Great. So just as a brief summary of some of the interviews that we heard, I'm really impressed, first of all, by the amazing extroversion and effervescence of these three people. They're active people, they seek relationships, their moods are upbeat and happy, and they're content, delighted actually with their retirement, and have fashioned ways to impact their worlds. We've sent out a handout to you, which we call Deepening Friendships, and it's a little bit of a paint by the numbers approach, but I'll apologize for that in advance. There are a couple of themes that arose here that were quite, for me, quite obvious. The first is all of these folks have volunteered in robust ways in their retirement. Trevor has done an amazing job in his community, homeowners associations, and also has a breadth of activities that he pursues. Carol, as you can tell, has been as she called herself, a bossy church lady who has been marvelously effective in her own religious community. Bob has spent some time working and also ministering to folks in a retirement home, a totally new venue for him, so it's been enabled him to get away from kind of an inherent dilemma that pastors sometimes face. There are a couple of I would say, lessons here and refer you back to SMART goals. One of the things that Marie and I are doing in our retirement is that we set a goal to have 2 dinner parties a month with couples whom we don't know very well. And we did that purposefully because A, we love to eat, we like to drink, and also we're exploring, finding, broadening, and deepening relationships. So we set ourselves a SMART goal of 2 dinner parties a month. And then what we do, of course, is we get a sense of chemistry with that couple, and then we pursue it or not as appropriate. Building and deepening relationships, I think, is somewhat analogous to becoming better at dribbling a basketball or gardening or learning a skill that you have but want to become more accomplished at. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes focus. It's not something that's natural. Although with our 3 folks in this video, they certainly have the natural character to be outgoing and social. So in summary, take a look at the handout that I sent on deepening friendships and make clear to yourself what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then be purposeful in the approach you have to deepening friendships. Thank you.